club members, and it may be July and we may be in the heart of winter, and some of you are probably in Europe sunning yourselves, as many of us are. And while you're watching this, I will be in Champagne hosting my Champagne tours. But before I departed, I opened 2 sensational bottles for our Champagne theme this month, a deep dive into the beautiful world that is Chardonnay. Now, Chardonnay is an anomaly of sorts in the Champagne region if you look back in time. When we first started to produce still wines of the Champagne region, they were red. The grapes were black. It was predominantly Pinot Noir, nowhere near as finessed as it is today. And of course, most of Champagne is sparkling wine. But back in the days, in the 1600s and 1700s, we were producing still red wine. But where does Chardonnay come into the picture? Well, there is a fable, there is a story, and it's probably true. But, recounting off-piste, off the top of my head, I recall being at the beautiful Chateau de la Marqueterie, so the privately owned estate of the Taittinger family. And of course, Taittinger, one of those maisons which has a connection to the Chardonnay grape, and of course, the Comte de Champagne, their prestige cuvée, which is 100% Chardonnay from several Grand Cru sites. I remember having this conversation at the dinner party one night with Clovis from Taittinger, and he said, Chardonnay is rumored to have come from the Count of Champagne, Thibaut IV. He was the King of Navarre, and he'd fallen in love with the beautiful Blanche de Castile. And it was actually his aunt. The Queen was his aunt. And to be punished for his sins, he was sent off to fight with the Crusades. So he went off on this wild adventure, and when he eventually returned from the Orient in the 1200s, he bought 2 gifts for the Queen, who was still madly and head over heels in love with. One of them was the Damask Rose, and the other was a clone, a grape varietal that we now know to be Chardonnay. This is the first story, the first recount of Chardonnay being presented to the region of Champagne. And boy, does she have her place now. Now, we've got 3 grapes that are grown most commonly in the region, Chardonnay being a white grape or a green skin grape, Pinot Noir, Pinot and Meunier being red grapes. But we have some other more forgotten grape varietals that are permitted to be planted within the Champagne appellation: Alban, Pinot Gris, Pinot Blanc, Petit Meunier. So these varietals are planted legitimately, but in much smaller proportions than what Chardonnay is in the Champagne region. But Chardonnay is a chameleon, and I love the Chardonnay grape. I love it whether it's in Burgundy, I love it in the Yarra Valley, and I love it particularly in Champagne. The thing about Chardonnay is that she's really the feminine being of the vineyard. She's very elegant, she brings a suppleness to the wines. I love the way that she ages. When Chardonnay is quite young in a wine, and depending on where she is planted in the world, and indeed between the sub-terroirs of the Champagne region, she can express a very different character depending on where her feet are planted. She is a true chameleon, but she offers a suppleness, a delicate nature. She's quite bright, citrus, mineral in her earlier stages of youth when she's grown in Champagne. But as Chardonnay ages, you get these beautiful tertiary characters. You get French butter and cream and brioche and this lovely almond character. And a lot of people are wild about vintage and prestige Grand Cru Chardonnay blends such as Dom Runa and Comte de Taittinger, and for good reason. So today we're looking at the idea of Chardonnay. I have chosen 2 outstanding champagnes to represent them. For all of our lovers, we have Le Hurt Frère, the Le Hurt brothers, Blanc de Blanc Brut Nature. Now, this champagne house has a long pedigree. I believe in the 1800s the house was founded. Aurélien Le Hurt is 7 generations handing the baton down through that family, and there's more generations to come up. They have vineyards located in the Épinay region and in Chavaux. Now, we have Chardonnay being plot by plot picked, plot by plot pressed, all fermented in small 20 to 28 barrique barrels coming from Burgundy. So we've got barrels that have been used, so they've got virtually no timber influence, but what it does allow is the maison to give some individuality in the way that they ferment the wines. So choosing barrel, choosing the plot, and extracting that particularity of terroir of that Chardonnay plot or that particular wine plot, depending on what they're making. They are Brut Nature. Someone asked me recently, what is Brut Nature? And it's very simple, no sugar. There can be a tiny amount of sugar, but really Brut Nature means 0 sugar. This is 0 dosage, and we are seeing Chardonnay in her purest expression. For all of our connoisseurs, one of my favorite champagnes. It's been out of stock. We've had a new container just arrive, and thank God, because it is certainly one of our favorites, and one of our favorites for our wholesale customers, de Souza, one of the most well-known and well-respected families for the pioneering of biodynamics in the Champagne region with Eric de Souza. And they are located in Aviz, which is Grand Cru territory. Grand Cru being the highest ranking vineyard parcels in the Champagne region, the purest and chalkiest of soils, and that is a Blanc de Blanc called Avec le Temps, with time. Two outstanding producers, two outstanding cuvées, but they have their differences, and I wanted to showcase that by looking at two champagne houses who have same production technique, different terroirs, showing you what Chardonnay can do just being in that Champagne region with different expression. Le Hurt Frère, the Le Hurt brothers, and Aurélien Le Hurt, located in Chevaux. They've got vineyards in the south coast of Épinay. They're using vines that are a minimum of 30 years of age. So you've got lower yield, higher intensity. They are holding back some of that malic acid. So they've got about 20% of wines with that tart malic acid coming into the blend. So you are going to expect something very bright, very zippy, very intense when it comes to acid line. When I was looking at the two cuvées side by side, so we're talking both Chardonnay, both from Champagne, both aged in small barrel, but very different. I noted the mousse, the bubble, the bead on the de Souza, which is in my right hand, was certainly a lot smaller, a lot finer than the Le Hurt. That's giving me an indication of time in bottle, of age, a little bit more time in the bottle on the de Souza. As the wine ages in the bottle with the yeast inside the bottle, once it's gone through that secondary fermentation, the protein of the wine will change. The bubble will get physically smaller in its size, and actually research has found by scientists Leger that it gets finer in its skin. So you get a silkier approach. So I noticed that there was a difference on the size of the bubble. There's a little bit more depth of color, just a little bit more golden bronzy color on the Le Hurt, which is in my left, than the brightness of the de Souza that's in my right. Now, you have 5 grams of dosage on the de Souza, 0 grams dosage on the Le Hurt Frère. Direct comparison of two wines, I can see that there's more tertiary aromatic quality on the de Souza, more butter, more cream, more brioche, a little bit of salty saline minerality on the palate of the de Souza. Where I've got more orchard fruit, you've got some pear, you've got some candied lemon, some citrus character, a little bit more round, and just a little bit more spice and toast on the Le Hurt in the left-hand side. There's definitely a difference in the style of the wines. What I notice on the palate, de Souza, organic, biodynamic, small vineyard. Their wines are a little bit older in their average age. So we're talking average 30 years for Le Hurt, we're average 50 years for de Souza. That's quite a significant period of time for the minimum aging of the vine. So we're talking a significantly lower yield and real intensity. But what's most remarkable between the two wines, the two differences, and the way Chardonnay is playing out will be the vineyard sites. Champagne as a region 70 million years ago didn't exist. It was an inland sea. And you've got this big basin, and around the edges of that basin, you've got some hillier slopes, you've got some chalk, you've got some clay, you've got some marl, you've got some limestone. Where the Champagne appellation really did this Grand Cru, Premier Cru ranking was on the purity of chalk. And Chardonnay does super well when you've got this purity of chalk underfoot, and when you're located in Aviz, a Grand Cru village, you have beautiful, pure chalk. I remember in 2008, 2009, I think it was, I met with Eric de Souza for the first time, and he went in the cellar and he scratched out a fossil, a belemnite fossil. And you've got to think, if the sea subsided, you've got these fossilized creatures left behind. It is a reference, a tribute to why the terroir is so unique in the Champagne region. Eric has this theory that there's a minerality and a certain nutrient that comes from these belemnite fossils, but most importantly, we've got a purity of chalk. And when I put de Souza in my glass, instantly I see precision, I see finesse, I see this intensity and this salty minerality, which is a direct translation from what's underfoot through the vine into the grape and into your wine. Chardonnay in Champagne is a chameleon. Chardonnay anywhere in the world will reflect the terroir of where she's grown, but when Chardonnay is in 100% wine from the Champagne region, expect elegance and expect finesse, but it'll depend on vessel, depend on time, depend on the winemaker and the sub-terroir for you to explore the different expressions of Chardonnay. And of course, as she ages, she gets a bit more round, she gets a bit more voluptuous, and her possibility for food pairing will change and open up. But two amazing examples looking at the purity of Chardonnay in the Champagne region and one of my favorite grape varietals. We'll see you on the next episode.